I'm a huge fan of Alpine.js for adding JavaScript sprinkles to any of my web apps. And so I thought I built an Alpine component today. I thought it'd be fun to share it with you. So real quick to just kind of see like what we're going to be building. I've got this sample application here. We use it at judo scale for just like testing out request queuing and auto scaling and that kind of thing. All it really does is you click this button and it sends a request that takes as long as you tell it to take. So that request took a second. If I want to fire it off again, it'll take 5 seconds and so on. So, and this can be kind of useful to like fire off a bunch of these to pile up some requests and cause some queuing or whatever. But if I want to fire off a bunch of these, I have to do this whole, command click nonsense and open them up in new tabs. And, that's just kind of ugly. I don't want to have to do that. So what I'd much rather do is use async fetch to be able to, click this button a bunch of times and maybe see a little bit of feedback here for maybe how many pending requests are, how many completed requests there are, and that kind of thing. And that's what we're going to build. So this application is a Ruby on Rails application. That doesn't really matter for this demo. We're really just going to be working all with Alpine here. But I guess we will talk about how to install Alpine using Rails 7 import map, and that's kind of cool. So right now, this app has no JavaScript at all. It's just it is just a very vanilla Rails 7 app. So it does have an application.js file, but it's empty. All it has is this comment that they stick in here for how to work with import map. So we're kind of starting from nothing, and that's totally cool. Let's fire up the Alpine docs here. And if we look at their installation, we could pull it in via a script tag, but import map lets us actually bring stuff in as a module, but without having a node installed at all, which is fantastic. So what we want is this, but of course we have to add Alpine.js, and we're going to use import map to do that. So I'm going to bring up a terminal, and let's run Rails 7 gives you this bin import map executable, and we can just tell it to pin Alpine.js. And what that did is if we look at our import map config, we now have Alpine.js in here. And now we can just go to our application.js, paste in those lines that we just copied, and let's just make sure that there is a global Alpine available in our app now. So if I reload this page, let's move this off to the right. Okay, let's open up a console and see if Alpine is there. And it is. And let's do just a very basic thing in Alpine. Let's go to our view here. I'm just going to use the xinit directive that that just runs whatever code I put in here whenever this element is initialized, whenever it comes into view, essentially. And go back and reload. So we reload, we've got hello here. Okay, so we have Alpine installed, and now we can actually start doing some cool things. So we know we want to hook into the form submit event and intercept the default form submission so we can send an async fetch request. And we also know we're going to want to be displaying some information about completed and pending requests here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in some markup for that pending and completed requests, because honestly, it just would be very boring to watch me build that. But let's reload. Okay, we see pending and completed requests over there, but it's not dynamic at all. So what we want to do is we want to have some data for pending and completed requests. I'm just going to make this whole div a component, and we'll have a pending 0, completed 0. And now with that data defined anywhere in here, I can reference that data. So let's get rid of the contents here, and we'll say the text value of this element should now be pending. And the text value of this is our completed value. And then let's go ahead and hook into the form's submit method. So this is going to be on submit. And for right now, let's just increment the pending count. Obviously, we're going to have to do more than that, but this way we should at least see that pending number in our UI increment before the page reloads. So let's reload this. So watch this pending number when we submit. Hopefully it changes. It did not. So something's not working right. I guess first of all, let's put a console log in here just to make sure this is actually happening. And submit this. Okay, console log worked. It said submit down here before the page reloaded. So that piece is fine. Let's cancel the submit event here so that we don't have to wait for the thing to reload. So I'm going to find the magic event object, prevent default. All right, so if nothing else, that should prevent this form from submitting when we click this button. Okay, now we actually do see the pending number increment. I guess, I don't know, the form submission maybe was just preventing that from happening. Okay. Things are happening. Now what we actually want to do though is actually intercept the request and send it via fetch. And in my opinion, that's way too much to do sort of inline here in the HTML. I know the Alpine docs have some examples where they have, X data objects that are very complicated, not complicated, but they're multi-line HTML attributes. And I don't love that because, I don't get syntax highlighting or formatting or anything in here. I think it gets kind of messy. So what I prefer to do, anytime it gets a little more complex, is use this style of extracting Alpine data, and then all we put in the markup is, the name of the data object and the specific things that we're binding to. So let's just grab this so we have an example and go to our JavaScript. And we have to define it before we start Alpine, which is no problem. Let's save this to reformat it. Okay. All right. So what do we want to call our data? So we'll call it our request interceptor. And our properties are pending and completed. And we are going to have a form with a submit event where we increment the pending count and we prevent default on the form. We can get rid of this. Okay, so if we go back to our view, now we can change this data to just request interceptor. And then we change this to, is it xbind, right? Xbind, we're going to bind it as the form that we defined right here. Hopefully, if we go back, we need to change. No, these don't need to change. These are the same. So they still have pending and completed attributes. So let's go back, and if we reload, we should have no change in behavior. No problem there. Okay. All right, now we can start working on actually sending that request. We're incrementing pending. We are preventing default. Now we actually want to send the request. So we basically want to do something like this. We want to fetch some URL, then we don't actually care about the response, but after it's completed, that's when we want to say this dot pending minus equal 1, this dot completed plus equal 1. Now for this URL, we want to use the same URL that the form would submit to. Now the form is a get. It does a get, so it takes the params and puts them in the query string. So we're actually going to have to do that piece a bit manually. So first let's grab the form, which is a few ways to do. We could do event.target, but also this dot. Actually, I think the element, that's going to be the surrounding div. Yeah, event.target is going to be the form. Then we can use that form to construct some form data. And then we'll use that form data to build some URL params. URL search params, that's the one. I think it's just toString on it. And then the form dot, so then our URL is just going to be our, actually let's leave that. Let's say const URL equals our action of the form. And I think we still need the ampersand there. We'll double check with params. Let's just log that right now. All right, except you know what? I passed the form instead of the form data here. So let's fix that and then try to send this request. Ooh, I definitely screwed that up. Let's see. Oh, well, I used an ampersand instead of a question mark. That's going to be a problem. Let's try this again. Okay, it did it. It went pending and then completed after a second. So that's looking pretty good. All right, we can get rid of our console log. And you know, already this is just about what I want. Fire off a bunch of these and they'll get completed. I'd like to see some information about how long these requests are taking. So let's do this. Let's track an array of timings. And then when the request finishes, we can push a new timing. And then maybe we can have let's add a line to our table. Let's add a line to our table, maybe with just maybe the last response time. All right, so of course we don't have anything called last response time yet. So let's add that. We're going to make it basically a computed property, which is just a get method. Yeah, let's return Right now, let's just return test just to like make sure that that shows up in there. Just a quick sanity check. Okay, so that works. So let's say, well, first of all, we need to handle if there are no timings. We'll just return nothing. So we know we have some timings, so let's return the last one. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, whoops, I want this, dot timings. Let's try that again. Very nice. That is exactly what I want. Let's put a milliseconds on there just so we know what we're dealing with. Now we fire off a bunch so that they queue up. They'll start to slow down. Perfect. Exactly what we expected to see there. As the requests queue up, they slow down, the response time increases. So that is pretty great. I'm feeling good about that. I'm noticing now that we have this timings, the number of completed requests is actually unnecessary. We can derive that from timings. So let's actually get rid of this. Get rid of this. And so we'll need another getter. And this is just going to be the number of timings we have. Again, we need this. We need a comma there, and let's see if we're still working here. Excellent. Did exactly what we wanted. What else? I think we might be pretty close here. One thing, it'd be kind of nice if, if there are no pending requests and I send another one, I kind of want the completed requests to clear out. Like I'll send a series of requests and I want to see them roll in, but once I start another request, I kind of want this information to go away. I kind of want to start over. So yeah, let's do this. Before we increment pending, if nothing is yet pending, let's clear out the timings. Let's give that a try. So that worked great. Now there's nothing pending. If I start another one, it clears them out. Perfect. I like that. I think the only thing I might change here, just as a personal preference, is this. There's kind of a lot happening in this submit method. A lot of things to do with building the form and submitting the form that I would kind of like to pull out. What I would rather do here is something like, doing stuff with the event, doing stuff with the component data needs to live here. But beyond that, I want a method that just makes the request. I'll need to give it the form. And then I need to tell it what to do when it completes, which is just going to be our callback. So we need the form, that's fine. But the rest of the stuff all has to do with, oh no, we need the start time too. That's part of this. So we're not extracting a lot, but it's this, all this form data stuff, it's just kind of noise. I don't love it in there. So let's move it. And actually, we don't even need to make this make request. It doesn't need to be a part of this object. It doesn't it doesn't care about it at all. So we can just make it a top level thing. Get our form data, get our params, build our URL. Oh, and then we have our callback. So now we've got this make request function that doesn't care anything about Alpine, doesn't care anything about components, anything like that. You just give it a form and a callback and it does its thing. And then our Alpine code is all very specific to things that it's mutating and using from this component. Let's see if that works. Fantastic. We haven't broken anything. And I think one last refactor I would make is that I forgot that the event object is actually passed in here. So we can just kind of clean this up just a little bit. And again, let's just make sure that we didn't break anything there. All looks great. So yeah, with just, not a lot of JavaScript here. And of course, we didn't have to touch anything on the server side here. The server side behavior is all the same. Very few changes to our markup. All we needed to do is add our X data that establishes the Alpine component. We needed to bind the submit event to the form, and then we just have these, directives that populate those parts of the page. And it's all, very readable. Our JavaScript itself is very readable. And this is the kind of stuff that I just love Alpine for. I just love it. You might think because I'm a Rails guy, I would be a stimulus guy, but I'm not a stimulus guy. It's not my jam. I like Alpine. I think there's a lot less ceremony. And one of the reasons I wanted to make this video was that I think some of the complaints about Alpine is that it's too much in your HTML. It gets too noisy. And I think I agree with that. I think you can easily try to do too much in your HTML with Alpine, which is why I really like this pattern of extracting components into these data objects, and, of course, then they're also reusable. In this case, we're not reusing this at all, but it's just a nice way to keep this code nice and self-contained. We could put it in its own file if we wanted to, but this is our only JavaScript in this whole application. So we're not worried about that so far. So yeah, this is why I love Alpine. I wanted to share it with you. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.